Welcome back to Small Changes, Big Shifts. I'm Dr. Michelle Robin here with my co-host Bailey Sosa, and we're wrapping up our 6-part series around 6 decades, 60 years. And I'm very intentional about our guests. You probably know that already, but I wanted to bring on Mary Bickelmeyer Lucas today. It's important I say her maiden name today because years ago I read her book, Lunchmeat Life Lessons by a Butcher's Daughter. And I absolutely loved it. So I actually remember I was down at Table Rock Lake. I remember finishing the book, and I saw her email address in the back. So I sent her a note and found out she lived in Kansas City. How crazy is that? I'm not from here, so I did not realize the Bickelmeyer legacy, and it truly is a legacy. And I believe your work through sharing your father's lessons has probably changed generations in your family because you have a big family.
Big family.
So Mary, welcome to Small Changes,
Thank
Big
you.
Shifts.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, you use my maiden name, but I shorten it usually. I always go by Mary B. Lucas. The B stands for Bickelmeyer. So yes, I'm from a big family. I'm number 9 of 10 children. When we said our prayers at night, we would say, God bless Joan, Judy, Johnny, Jimmy, Joey, Jerry, Jeannie, Jane, Mary, and Barbara. And obviously, you know, my sister Barbie, she doesn't like it when anyone calls her Barbie but me, and she doesn't like it when I call her Barbie either, but I do it all the time. So I know I introduced you to Barb, and you're good friends with her. She just retired from her provost position at University of Kansas, and it's wonderful connection. I always say I'm a people connector, and I think the friendships that we started as a result of the book, and then people you've introduced me to and I've introduced you to, it's been a real gift. So thank you so much for that.
Well, I love people connector. I like people collector as well. And because I got a chance to hear a speaker that wrote a book called Same Kind of Different as Me. And one of his lessons were where people kind of throw you back and, let you go. And I'm kind of that person with LTRs. Once you're in my life, I feel like it's a mutually beneficial relationship and good energy then and forever. So we've been friends for a long time. I appreciate the way you've introduced me to different people for speaking opportunities. But I truly love the Bickelmeyer story.
Yes.
And I love your father's book. And there's one that sticks in my mind all the time. One of the life lessons that sticks in my mind is the comeback sauce.
Comeback sauce.
So tell our listeners about the comeback sauce.
Well, again, this book is called Lunchmeat Life Lessons because, let me do a little backdrop of it. Lunchmeat Life Lessons because my father was a butcher by trade with an 8th grade education, but he was the smartest man I ever knew. And I was a first-generation college graduate, and let's go backwards. I'm 22 years old, and I'm completely full of myself. And I'm sure none of you were ever 22 years old and full of yourself. I was. So I graduate from Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas, and get my first job in the corporate world. I'm going to be a recruiter for a company down on the Country Club Plaza, which is, at that time, swankiest area of Kansas City. And I'm going to wear a suit every day and go to the office, and I'm all that. And I remember I got the phone call where I got the job, and in our family home, there was a butcher block table, which was the center of our family universe, really. That's where my dad would sit and hold cord at this butcher block table. And I remember I got the phone call and I start squealing, I got the job. And my dad called me over to the butcher block table. He said, you got that job you wanted? You're going into the people business? And I looked at him and I said, no, I'm going into the staffing industry. And he looked at me and he said, get out of your own way, girl. You're going into the people business. And if you listen to me, I might be able to share a thing or two with you about how to succeed in the people business. And so that's really where the comeback story came about. So I'll share with all of you the comeback sauce story because I said to him, okay, lay it on me. What do you want to tell me before I start my first day on my new job? And he just looked at me and he said, don't forget the comeback sauce. And I said, what? And I thought it was so cheesy. And I said, comeback sauce? You want to tell your college-educated daughter that the most important thing I can do when I start my new job tomorrow is don't forget the comeback sauce? What does that even mean? And he said, that's so easy. He said, I remember it like it was yesterday. The comeback sauce is making sure that you make a meaningful connection with the people around you, one person at a time, every chance you get, and make sure you're memorable. Pour the comeback sauce on everybody you meet. And I said, where did you come up with it? He said, I remember like it was yesterday. He said, when I was finally able to open my own meat market, he said, my mom died at the age of 42. I was from a big family. And I finally was able to go out on my own, open my own business. I had 3 kids and your mom and me, 5 mouths to feed. And I finally opened my own meat market. And I wasn't in business very long before I got, a couple of guys came in that were working with me. They came in one morning, they said, Johnny, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. And he said, what do you mean we're in trouble? And he said, we were at a bar last night and at Sammy's bar, and Mr. Snow, who we used to work for, was there. And he told us that he has a plan to put you out of business. And Dad said, he looked at him and said, what's the plan? He said, they said every time you advertise a price per pound, they're going to advertise 10 cents per pound cheaper until you can't afford to be in business any longer. And he said, he looked at him and he started laughing. And he was laughing and he said, that plan won't work. And he said, why are you laughing? That plan won't work. We don't have any money to advertise. All we got is the quality of the product we sell, the roof over our heads, what little we pay ourselves. He said, I made up then and there. And I said, we got comeback sauce, boys. You pour the comeback sauce on everybody who comes in here and we'll do just fine. And they said, what do you mean? He said, all you have to do is make sure everybody who comes in here, you do a little extra, a little something more. Make yourself memorable and they'll come back and they'll bring their friends and we'll do just fine. And now it's 60 plus years later, before you were born, and 60 plus years later, Bicklemeier Meats is more successful than they've ever been. They have figured out different ways to pour the comeback sauce on. And I think one of the things, they were just voted the #1 taco in the state of Kansas by Photos Magazine, and they only serve tacos on Saturdays. They have such a huge Hispanic following. They found ways to have comeback sauce in so many varieties. And there's more to that story. And again, it's in Lunchmeat and Life Lessons. But I think the thing that I really, really took away from that was, make yourself memorable. Treat everyone with integrity and respect. Comeback sauce doesn't have to be like some meaningful big thing you do. Sometimes it's just a thank you. Sometimes it's just a I appreciate you. And it's just a connection. And I love that Maya Angelou quote so much. I think it summarizes my dad's comeback sauce story is people will forget, and I don't ever say it right, but people will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's the essence of comeback sauce.
I probably think about that story 3 or 4 times a week. And it makes me think about when I was in chiropractic school, I got to work for Dr. Yenny, and he and Pat, they took me to a seminar down in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Dr. Jack Sibley, who has become one of my mentors, it's been a long time since we've actually been in person together. But he said everybody has on their forehead 4 letters, MMFI, make me feel important. And so here's my question back to you. Having such a big family, so you have 10 people in the family, 10 kids.
10 plus mom and dad, 12.
9 siblings.
And now there's 160, I think.
How do you make generational change with your father's philosophy of Lunchmeat and Life Lessons and that whole thing of make me feel important and that people connect her?
Honestly, that's a funny question because the wisdom that he shared is so timeless. It doesn't necessarily need generational change. I think that's why the book has been so successful, is because it resonates with people of all ages. I mean, now I get to speak about the book all the time and it goes everywhere. I don't know what the right word for that is, but it resonates with people that are in academic, no matter where you are, corporate America, or one of my biggest clients was the IRS. I mean, or, Salvation Army has had me back numerous times. My family's no different than all these places where I speak about the book now. I think timeless wisdom is timeless.
Who in your family has latched on to it? Has everybody latched on to it? Do you have some nieces and nephews or great nieces and nephews that have said, oh my gosh, who's going to carry this legacy on beyond you?
Everybody. It doesn't matter where you are. This wisdom, the butcher's wisdom, as I call it in the book, it's timeless. I think what's interesting isn't so much who's latched onto it, it's which lesson have they latched onto based on the time in their life and where they are. I mean, you can reread the book. I can reread the book. I mean, I wrote the book and sometimes I have to go back to it. Or my husband will say to me, whenever I'm cranky or down, that I'm still say, go do a speech, you'll be much nicer afterwards. Because you're reminded of this grassroots wisdom that is timeless in terms of how to make meaningful connections. So what I mean by that is there are certain people in the family that might be starting out their career. Maybe there's a great niece, or, again, that's how big my family is. Their great niece who's moving to Chicago and she wants to think about how she approaches her job. And so comeback sauce is maybe a great lesson for her. Or I have a niece who's trying to figure out how she maneuvers the life that she's in now when she doesn't really like her coworkers very much. And we talk about find the like. Or there are some people that are at their stage in their life where they're trying to just figure out how they manage all the things that are going on and they realize it's over the L. So these stories, there's more stories behind the story, but it's the same with readers. It's the same with my family. What resonates with someone in that book is more about where they are in their life than it is about what the lessons are in the book, like in sequential order. And that's really weird because I wrote the book. I started it the day we buried my father and my sister. They passed at the same time. And we had a double funeral. My dad was always a bargain hunter, and my sister was going to pass from cancer. My mom was already gone. And my dad decided, I think he just willed himself to go. And he didn't want to bury another child. He'd buried one before. And my niece came up to me at the funeral and said, "Who's going to give us lunch meat and life lessons now?" And I said, "What do you mean, who's going to give us lunch meat and life lessons out?" I'd never heard that phrase. That wasn't something I would say. And she said, "Whenever I'm sad or down in the dumps or I need some advice or counsel, I go sit at the butcher block table and I can sit across from Grandpa and I walk away inspired. I walk away ready to tackle the world. Somehow there's a lesson that he always has that applies to the situation I'm in at the moment." And so I always call it lunch meat and life lessons because he always has a salami sandwich, slice it real thin, put it on Wonder Bread, a beer, German beer, usually room temperature, salami sandwich, beer, Grandpa's wisdom, and I walk away inspired. I call it lunch meat and life lessons. And all I could think about that moment, Michelle, were my sons, Chase and Nick. Because the good news about being number 9 of 10 children is my parents retired when I was growing up and I got away with everything. The bad news is my parents died when they were very young and they wouldn't know my father. Or could they? That's when I started writing. I wrote Lunch, Meat, and Life Lessons, not just for Chase and Nick, but especially for them, but for the generations of the family that wouldn't know my dad. And I wanted his legacy to live on. And it does in ways I never would have imagined. And I'm so grateful.
I think that's one of the things we talk about often in the show is lessons will continue to show up in your life in a different way until you pick up on what you're supposed to learn from it. And so the same thing applies for looking back at the book. You're going to read it differently at different phases that
Yes.
you're in. I have been around the quadrants of well-being and have been on my own healing journey for 6 years now, and I'll hear something that I've heard probably 5 years ago, but it hits differently
Right.
because I'm open to it. I'm looking for it. I'm exploring different ways of being. And so it's beautiful that you've been able to take the legacy of your dad to not only transcend generations in your own bloodline, but to our communities in the Kansas City community and anybody who has the opportunity to hear you speak or read your book, because at the end of the day, they're core lessons and
Right.
they're going to just apply to you differently depending on who you are and what you're going through and maybe the answers that you're looking for. And so for you, when you reflect back on where you're at in your journey right now, what's a pillar lesson for you in the chapter that you're in?
Over the L. That's the one I use almost every day. And I'll share that one too. So this was okay. I'm at the twilight of my career now where I'm pretty much only doing what I want when I want. And I was so wrapped up in my career. This was about 20 years after I started. I kind of risen through the ranks and I was at this C-suite level and my boss's boss got fired, the CEO of the company. And I remember it was so unexpected. And I thought, I have to quit. I have to leave. I mean, he's the culture keeper of the company. I kind of followed him at 2 companies. And I remember calling my dad, and I'd been in a meeting in Fort Lauderdale, and there was this new restaurant that just opened up in Prairie Village, Kansas called Blue Moose. And I said, "Dad, meet me at the Blue Moose. I need to meet you there. I'm going to be in need of a lot of advice." And I get there, before he does, and I have 2 glasses of wine. I'm ready to wine, and I've had some wine. So he walks in and he sits down at the bar, and of course he knows everybody almost. He was like the mayor of Kansas City. He walks in and he sits down. The bartender knows Mr. Bicklemeyer. And I want to talk to Dad. And the bartender's asking him questions. And he's listening to the back and forth. And I look over and I said, "Dad, I need your advice." He said, "What's going on?" I said, "Ray, my boss's boss got fired today, and I don't know what's going to happen to the company. And I'm wondering, should I update my resume? Should I leave? What's going to happen? I don't know, Dad." And he goes, "Wait a minute. Something happened above you, 2 levels above you, and You don't know what's going to happen as a result, and you're thinking you might need to quit your job. What do you love about your job still? What do you, and I said, I love my boss, the president of the company. I love the people I work with. I love the team. But Dad, what's going to happen? And he looks at me and goes, it's over the L. Girl, get over it. It's over the L. Just write it out. See what happens. I said, what do you mean it's over the L? He said, that's a phrase that I tell myself whenever something that I don't have any control over is kind of making me worried or anxious. And I realize it's over the L. I said, where did you come up with that? And the bartender said, where did you come up with that? And he said, it was 1951. You see, there was a flood, and we had heard for, it was August. We had heard for weeks that there might be a flood. It had been raining all summer long in Kansas City. But all of a sudden, the National Guard comes in, and they come into where the meat market is down in Kansas City, Kansas, right by the river. They say, get out. Get out right now, Mr. Bickelmeyer. The levees broke upstream in Leavenworth and Lawrence, and it's a matter of time before the floodwaters come here, and you need to get out. And he said, all I could take was my best set of knives and go home. He said, so I went home and I waited, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And the next morning I wake up to your mom crying. I can hear her. I'm back in the bedroom, and there's one television set in the family home in 1951. You're lucky if it's color. Ours was. And he said, I come out and I hear your mom, John, get up, come out here. John, come quick. It's over the L. It's over the L. And I walk out and I look at the television set, and she's right. It's over the L. And I look at her and I said, what's over the L? And the bartender, what's over the L? He said, the floodwaters. You see, up the hill from the meat market was a grocery store. The sign above the grocery store was Milgram's, Milgrams. And the water was over the L on the Milgram's, on top of the Milgram's grocery stores. And so where was the meat market? Underwater. So I turned to your mother and I said, Mary, let's go back to bed. It's over the L. And I said, wait a minute. Everything you've worked for, the meat market, it's underwater. And you turn to Mom and you say, let's go back to bed. It's over the L. And then I just thought, and I shivered from it. I said, and is that why you called Jerry the flood baby? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, the bartender was like, and he goes, no. He said, might as well make the most of the situation. It was over the L. What was I going to do? He said, I never got to sleep in or whatever very often. So he said, I went back to bed. And he goes, and Mary, so many things you worry about are over the L. He said, when you don't have any control over something, it's over the L. He said, think about it. And I thought, because the next thing I knew, my friend Huey, he said, borrow everything you can. He said, I had enough money to build the meat market back, but I was eligible for loans, 2% government loans at that time. I borrowed that money. I invested in real estate. I made more money on those real estate deals than I think I have in the meat market in 10 years. Good luck, bad luck, who knows? Some things are just over the L. And the minute you realize that, I think the less stressed you'll be, the happier. Write it out and see what happens. And so that's the over the L story. That's the one. I use that one for, car rental lines, over the L. I travel a lot, flight delays, over the L. Just so often. Or when someone pulls out in front of you in traffic, it's over the L. What are you going to do? Why do we get so stressed out about things that we have no control over? And I think whether you use over the L or anything, you need something to get yourself back into kind of that, and they call it my Zen place. It's over the L space, where why let this bother me? In the greater scheme of things, does it really matter? And the answer is no. And I think more importantly, sometimes the things that bother you the most may turn out to be the things that are most impactful or the best thing that ever happened to you.
I had very much adapted that mindset as a parent. You have to, in a way of there's so much out of your control, and that's scary sometimes. And I think to our listeners out there, when you hear us talk about surrender or the term over the L, it's easier said than done. But when you really just hone back in and remember that everything is working out for you, one of the mantras that really keeps me sane is, if it's meant for me, I can't stop it if it is, and I can't call it in if it's not. It's whatever is supposed to happen is going to happen, in good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah.
And in your dad's situation, he had to wait and see if it was going to be a good situation or a bad situation. But either way, it was out of your control. And just surrendering to that mindset and to allowing you to trust that everything is working out for you. It doesn't necessarily make life easier, but it does make it lighter. It doesn't feel so heavy when those moments come because you know that there's another lesson in it. And so you've taken this philosophy and really, it's your professional and your personal life. How did it guide you to speaking, and how are you using this to inspire organizations around the world?
Well, the first question was, how do I use this in speaking? And with the over the L mindset is, I mean, something almost always goes wrong, you know? And that's part of the reason when I'm speaking, I don't have a PowerPoint with a bunch of, you know, I don't have a bunch of videos and things and all that because almost always something goes wrong. It's late, something's going wrong, so it's really funny when something goes wrong or someone starts coughing in the middle of your presentation or something, it's over the L. When
Yeah.
once you say it, the whole audience is laughing. It's over the L. It does, you know, like the most situation. So I think in speaking, that's part of it, but it's also in getting to the speaking or bottom line is it doesn't matter what you do, life happens. And so, like I said, using it a lot when I'm traveling, personally or professionally, or just in that mindset of I think you're 100% on. I mean, don't have young children anymore, but I have young grandchildren.
Mm.
And so being a parent, being a grandparent, that over the all mindset is such a fantastic example for them. Last night, my little granddaughter Vivi stayed over and she was, of course, grandparents get to spoil. So she's having strawberries and chocolate eggs in bed, and she gets a little chocolate on the pillowcase. And she looks, Gigi, I got chocolate on the pillowcase. And I said, no problem, Viv, no problem at all. And I don't tell her over the L. She doesn't understand. I said, so what? That just shows you had a great time eating the chocolate. It's just that example. So I might not say the over the L phrase to her because she doesn't understand that, but it's no problem. It's no problem. And I think realizing that so many things that, don't get worried about this, Vivi, things are going to happen. So that one of my favorite lines she has, I think she's adapted it. She says, you get what you get and you don't fret. Here's so, yes.
Do you love being a grandmother?
Oh my gosh, it's the best gig ever. I think, for me, having raised two boys, to get a granddaughter and now I have a grandson, but to get her first, and I was always the girly girl of the family. So to have this little granddaughter who loves to run around in her princess dresses and it's just so fun. So yes, it's so fun. And then watching my little 2-year-old grandson Jack, watching him kind of just come into his own. I just am reminded when my mom would have all these children, my sister Joan, who was the oldest, she would always say, I couldn't wait to see who we got, and I love watching who we're getting. Vivi, I know a little bit better now. She's 4, but Jack's starting to talk and be verbal now. And I can't wait to see who we got.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Mary, I always appreciate your wisdom. And I'm going to go back and reread the book. So for our listeners, where's the best place for them to find the book?
Just Amazon. The Audible is available too through, the audiobook is through Audible or Amazon, or, again, I think it's in some local bookstores, but honestly, you can get it this afternoon if you order it on Amazon, I think so.
Get it really fast. Well, it's a wonderful book. And once again, the lessons are timeless. And so here's my last question for you, besides saying thank you. Thank you for saying yes to coming in person and sharing your wisdom with our audience. When you think about your own lessons, because you have a lot of wisdom yourself. So you have your dad's wisdom. What are a couple of your life lessons that you hope your boys will share that maybe are unique to you?
I think it's a nuance to comeback sauce. And I would say to my boys, to my grandchildren, to anyone, I think one thing I notice with this generation is forgetting that communication and responsiveness is kind of a form of respect and showing how you show up when they, it's kind of what my dad would say about comeback sauce. When someone's good enough to give a little bit of themselves to you, you take the time and make the effort to give a little bit of yourself back. Your personal brand, your legacy, your reputation comes with how you treat other people. And, again, I say this to companies, I say this to anyone, if someone is good enough to give a little of themselves to you, how are you replying in kind? So, I saw this funny thing on TikTok. I mean, I'm not even on TikTok, but it was one of those TikTok videos. And it just resonated so much with me. This woman was being interviewed and she said, "What if it's impressed you about the people in your life?" And she said, "The busiest man I ever knew, one of the most successful people I ever knew, was the quickest to respond to me when I reached out." And I like, "How does this happen? You're so busy." And he said, "Because I consider responsiveness and communication a form of respect. If you respect someone, you will get back to them."
So, Mary, as we wrap up the show today, are there any lessons that you hope our listeners take away from today's episode?
Well, one of my all-time favorites is about birthdays. I had my birthday last month, and I remember one time I was kind of whining about it, that nobody remembered my birthday. And my dad said to me, "If you don't have a happy birthday, it's your own damn fault." Michelle just had a big birthday too. And I just wanted to say, Dr. Michelle Robin, if you didn't have a happy birthday, it was your own damn fault. But I'm pretty sure you had a great one because I know you.
Well, Mary, thanks again. I've had a phenomenal birthday month, decided to celebrate the whole month and maybe even a little bit longer as I head off with Hellsberg. Barnett Hellsberg
Yes.
has been a big influence in my life and I think in your life as well. And we're heading off to Croatia with the Hellsberg Mentoring Group. So once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love your wisdom. I've heard it many times and it never gets old to me. So I can imagine what a gift it is for your father who's watching over your extended family and how proud he is and how proud your siblings are for you carrying that message. So,
Thank
okay. So, Mary, I love quotes. You love lessons. I love quotes. And I think you've seen these quote decks before.
Yes.
So how about you pick a quote and share it with our audience today?
All right. The quote I'm going to share is the prayer for protection. "The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The power of God watches over me wherever I am. God is."
I love that. I've said that prayer no less than probably 100,000 times the last 3 decades, especially in moments where I was, as you use the word, whining a few times a day, or when it was over the L. Thanks for sharing that. Once again, to our listeners, thanks for all the love, all the goodness you push our way. And we are sending you big heart-to-heart hugs, and we'll chat with you real soon.